Hello and welcome back to Bites of History. Today is our last episode of 2022.
Have you ever wondered how it made it to your table? Have you ever wondered how it made it to your shelf? If you love food, then this is the show for you. Bites of History with Irene.
This was a really big year for me. It was a tough year, but a good year because I started this podcast and it's something I've wanted to do for a really long time. And it feels crazy that it only started this year. I feel like it's such a part of our lives now. And it's an honor to have it be a part of yours, but it's like so ingrained in my week of researching and recording and editing and putting it up and reading all the comments and stuff. So I'm really, really grateful that this year has brought Bites of History and has brought all of our listeners in as well. So thank you. It's probably one of my proudest things of 2022. It's just that kind of vibe of I think I mentioned this maybe in the first episode where it sort of just feels like the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago and the second best time is right now, which is an old proverb. But I really do feel so grateful that I started it, I'm in the flow of it, I'm doing it instead of being oh, I need to get that started soon, which there are things in my life that I do that with and I shouldn't, but I'm just really happy to be here. And I'm really happy to have you here. So thank you. And I figured to usher off 2022 and welcome in the magic that is going to be 2023, we can do a whole episode all about champagne and Cava and Prosecco and what on earth the difference is. I would like to thank my sources, glassandvine.com, champagne.fr, wikipedia.org, vinovest.co, and the Bonner Private Wines video that I watched. Thank you guys so much. I could not have done this video without you. I definitely could have because I knew a lot less about this than I thought. And I would also like to say a big special thank you to my patrons. I am so lucky to have you guys in the Patreon. If you listening out there are not a part of the Patreon and you might like to be, you can check it out right there at patreon.com/Irene Walton. And there are tiers starting at only $2. So give that a look. It's very fun. It's very cute and it helps me out a lot. So thank you so much. Let's get started. I will tell you right now, this is going to be a bit of a shorter video because I think it's one of those videos that could be 6 hours long and video podcast, whichever medium you're on. I think there's a million things to be said about it. There are thousands of years of, well, not thousands. There are hundreds of years of research on it and stuff about it. So I'm going to very, 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 very lightly scratch the surface on champagne, Cava, and Prosecco. I love what I thought was champagne okay, that's not true. I've known that not all sparkling wines are champagne for a while, but I didn't know just how serious it all was and everything like that. So I figured it'd be fun to dive in, partially because I would like to just know a little bit more about what I'm drinking. They are all sparkly, but what's the difference? The number one thing that can delineate between all of these different types of sparkling wine is where they are coming from, their place of origin. So since we're going to be talking about three main ones today, champagne, Cava, and Prosecco, I'm going to dive into what that means for each of those. Champagne is from a very specific region. It's called Champagne, France, and sparkling wine can only be called champagne if it is made in Champagne with the special technique and everything like that. Cava is made in Spain and is made with the same technique as champagne, but is not made in Champagne, so you can't call it that. And then Prosecco is made in Italy. We're going to get into the more in-depth facets of all of that, but I just wanted to let you know right up top so you know where we're coming from, literally. So Champagne is in northern France, and it is a very special little place. It is the coldest part of France, and it also has some really unique soil. The soil there, it used to be, I think I got this right, it used to be underwater, a billion years ago, probably actually a billion years ago. It used to be underwater. And then now it is not, but it has a lot of cool soil affects that would come from being underwater. So there's a lot of limestone. There's even some clay in the soil, which makes it so that the grapes that are used for champagne are very special and have a very unique taste. Now, I am going to absolutely read the types of grapes off to you. The types of grapes in Champagne are usually Chardonnay grapes, Pinot Noir grapes, and Pinot Meunier grapes. You're welcome, France. And with that special combination of grapes, with the special soil, with the special area of Champagne, this wine has officially been considered an AOC product. Now, what is that? An AOC product, you might have heard the same thing for like Parmesan cheese. I think it's called DOP. There's DOC. And basically all of these mean it can only be called that if it's specific to this place. So an AOC product is the Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée group label. So, without me trying to sound French, the appellation or d'origine control. It's controlled by the city of origin. And it is the mark of a product that draws its identity and characteristics from a geographical origin. So that's what that means. That means it's from a specific place. It can only be called it if it's in that place. You'll see that with a lot of things. Champagne is probably one of our most commonly known ones. And if you didn't know it, now you do. You're welcome. Champagne's first written documentation is actually in 1531 by some Benedictine monks. And it was a thing for sure, but it didn't really get popular until like the 1600s when the sort of ultra wealthy royalty started drinking it. And then further than that, there weren't really very popular champagne houses, which would be like Dom Perignon and Moet, and is it Moet or Moet? Moet and Ruinart, I believe. All of these are very French names, and I took sign language in high school, so I'm not totally sure. But those champagne houses came to be super popular when Louis XV was in power in France from 1715 to 1774. And that's when people started being like, oh my gosh, rich and wealthy people drink champagne. That means like that could show us being rich and wealthy if we're drinking champagne too. Very like keeping up with the Joneses of the 1700s. Just like anything, you know, like it was like in our Jell-O episode, which we did before. Did we record the Jell-O episode? I don't think so. But basically like Jell-O used to be not Jell-O, gelatin molds and stuff used to be super, super popular and like only for the rich because it would take hours and hours and days to make it. So then when people in like the middle class wanted to kind of like show off, it would be something like getting Jell-O or in this case, getting champagne. So now a big difference between champagne and some other sparkling wines and champagne and wine in general is the fermentation process. So the harvesting of the grapes that we mentioned earlier happens between August and October. So it's a pretty short stint, which already makes it trickier to get. And on top of that, there's two fermentation processes. The first one is like any wine. So you're going to harvest your grapes August to October, and then you are going to age those in either stainless steel like vats or in oak barrels. This juice that is fermenting is then temperature controlled around the low to mid 60s while it does its thing. The sugar's sugar, the yeast's yeast, the ferment's ferment. And then we get our base wine, which is at this point just still. It's just like any old wine you'd pour into well, I'm sure it's different, but it's just still wine, nothing special about it. And then it goes into its second fermentation. So this base wine is then poured into the literal champagne bottle that you would then buy. It's poured into that, some sugar's added, some yeast is added, and then the second fermentation can begin. So this bottle is corked and then it's sealed up and it is placed horizontally. That's very important for some reason. The science I looked at was much too intense to try to get into on this episode. So it's sealed and put horizontally at an even colder temperature than it was before. The cold is a really important part of champagne, this cold second fermentation process. So then these dead yeast cells start to produce because they are coming from the fermentation and they're called lees, L-E-E-S. The aging continues, these dead yeast cells are happening. And then there's this guy called the Riddler, which this whole part, I'm like, this isn't real. Somebody like wrote this article as a goof. Apparently he is. The Riddler comes in and takes the bottles and rotates them and puts them at a higher like incline. So like they're horizontal, remember? And then now they're going to be like 25 degrees. Then the Riddler comes by and twirls him again and tips him up again. And this guy's got a whole lot to do. That's why they call him the Riddler. So the Riddler is doing this so that he can confuse the Lees. That's another part I couldn't fully understand, but apparently him flipping it around and moving it changes these Lees up, and that's part of what makes champagne so special and gives it such a unique flavor. Okay, so then they have to disgorge the Lees, and from what I was able to see, they uncork the champagne. That gets rid of the dead yeast cells, the Lees that we've been mentioning. And then with the stuff that spilled out, they kind of just refill it with a little more wine, some sugar, and sometimes even a little bit of brandy. And then they recork it. And then that's when it starts to like age further. And that's when it, gets shipped out and gets sent to its places. That's what I think. I think that's what it is. I think the champagne, I think that it's done. It was a confusing process, I'll tell you what, just to even read about. So I can't imagine being a Riddler and having to actually do it. How cool would that be, though, if your job title was, I'm a Riddler? Do you get to wear the suit, do you think? Also, just separately, one of my favorite parts of Futurama ever, one of my favorite lines, that's something that I like say all the time, is it's one of the first episodes, and it's when Leela meets Zap Brannigan, and he has her, Fry, and Bender in like prison on the ship, and he invites Leela up because he has a crush on her, and he's like in this very like sexy, romantic, like very tacky room, and he's asking Leela, he's like, "Do you want some champagne?" And she like rejects him, and she says like, "No, I'd literally rather be in prison." And then he's walking away, he's so dejected, and he goes. He goes, "Do you at least want to finish the champagne?" And she goes, "I think it's pronounced champagne." And he goes, "Oh, God." Like, you just can't get anything right. I love Futurama. Anyway, here's a fun little fact. There are actually about 20 million bubbles in a bottle of champagne. And I think it's like 90 pounds of pressure per square inch or something. That's why you always want to be really, 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 really careful when opening bottles of champagne, because I read something that like there are about 24 champagne related fatalities every year with the popping of the cork. And so you always want to twist the bottle, not the cork, away from you or anyone around you, preferably into like a dish towel or something so it can't go hurt anybody. Just so you all know. And, a lot of the times with champagne, you're paying a lot more. You're paying for that name, you're paying for the region, and you're also paying for the taste. Champagne is really delicious. It is very well balanced. It's very complex. It's very like bready at the end. And that breadiness comes from the yeasts that have gone through their little cycles. And it really is a wonderful drink. I love it. Now let's talk about its sister drink, Cava. Cava is the Spanish sparkling wine that we mentioned earlier. Now, it hasn't been around as long as French champagne. However, it has been having quite a little moment since like the mid 1800s. So it's been around for a while, and it's been very well enjoyed for a long time in Spain. Now, Cava does have the same exact technique that we just talked about with the making and the still wine and putting it into the bottle and da-da-da. So that's called the classic technique, or like technique de classical or something. But their grapes are different. So the grapes in Cava making are Macabo or Viura, Zarolo, Parellada, Chardonnay, Suberat Parent, Red Grenache, Trepat, Monasterel, and Pinot Noir. I'm so good at pronouncing. My God. Those are all wrong, I'm almost certain. So that is the same exact technique. However, it is, they are different grapes, so you're going to have a bit of a different flavor. However, Cava also has these really fine, really beautiful bubbles that we get from that classical technique of aging the sparkling wine in the bottle itself. So that's a really special thing. So that's why you're going to see two higher price points on especially champagne, but Cava as well, because It's a technique that takes a lot more time. Also, the grapes for both of these are picked by hand. They're not picked by machine. And like you could tell, they have a riddler. Like they have to have a guy whose whole job is to come in and twist bottles. So it's definitely going to be a higher price point, but you're also getting, you know, in a lot of people's opinion, a more quality drink. Now we are going to move on to the super popular, very trendy Prosecco. Negroni, Spagliato with Prosecco in it. Did you guys also think that they sounded like Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean? Spagliato with Prosecco in it. I always thought that whenever I heard that little TikTok. Anyway, Prosecco is what's kind of changing the game. It is very, very trendy. So, I mean, you could tell there's a whole like TikTok trend that went around with it involved. And it's definitely much newer on the scene and it's made very differently. So instead of having hand-picked grapes and, you know, aging it in its own bottle, yada, 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 Prosecco is actually machine gathered. The grapes are gathered by machine. Speaking of, the grapes that are used in Prosecco Prosecco uses something primarily called the Glura grape. And those are gathered by machine. And then they still do 2 fermentations because you need to get those bubbles in the second ferment. But they're doing their second ferment in large stainless steel containers, like what you make the original base wine in for champagne and cava. So it is a much, much less expensive process, less tedious, less work, less hands-on stuff needed, but it's a lot more affordable to make, so it's going to be a lot more affordable to buy. But in some people's opinion, it is not quite as balanced. It's not quite as like smooth and, you know, fancy as champagne and cava. The bubbles are definitely a little bit larger, a little bit less uniform, and some people don't mind that at all and really like it. And some people aren't as big of fans, and that's okay. That's the magic of, you know, a free drink. I'm going to have whatever is coming my way on New Year's Eve. I'll tell you what. But yeah, those are our main differences between champagne, cava, and Prosecco. There is actually something that I found that I thought was really interesting called crémants, which are French sparkling wines that are made with like the same grapes, the same exact technique. They're just not made in champagne, so they can't call it champagne. But that's basically like you're getting champagne without that title. So there's going to be a bit of a lower price point. And if you are somebody who is wanting to maybe get a little bit more into wine, wanting to try some different stuff, and you want to double check on like what process the bottle you have in your hand has been made with, you can look for like the traditional method on there. It should say like method traditionnel or traditional method or fermented in this bottle. Like it'll say that somewhere on there. And if you're like me and you just want to be, you know, friendly and kind and show up to your New Year's Eve party with a bottle of something, I don't think anyone's going to mind too much whether or not you bring champagne, cava, or Prosecco, or some LaCroix. Whatever. You don't have to drink. Keep that in mind with your fun New Year's plans coming up. I hope you guys have had a really wonderful holiday season, and I hope that continues. And that's about it for me. And that's about it for Bites of History for 2022. I can't wait to see you guys in the next year. I love you so much. Make sure you comment, like, and subscribe down below. You can turn on that notification bell and you can check my Patreon out right there or in the link in the description. Happy New Year and happy holidays, and drink a lot of water, and I love you.